Coming up in the next countdown LBL. Coming up next video. Title, nextVideo.description. Skip to this video now. Transcript for President Trump. A shutdown would be a terrible thing and everybody welcomed. Paramount releases the required drivers got. Director Mary Alice Parks. It's Wednesday in Washington. We're headed toward a vote. Hopefully to avoid a government shutdown on Friday at midnight, but there seemed to be a couple of last-minute hang-ups somewhere else. We'll get into those, but the president today seemed to signal that he's at least ruled out in his mind forcing a shutdown, and he isn't yet committed to sign the I was curious how you're gonna Coleman for the president said, because that's exactly where they're trying to do on Capitol Hill. They're trying to have a sense of what exact in this president will sign. And so far all indications he will sign it. But begrudgingly because he's going to get less money for a physical barrier along the southern border of Mexico that he would have had on the table even before the last shutdown. Here's what Cecilia Vega asked the president about the funding issue in the Oval Office. Just a little literary, or take a listen. President, are you willing to take my money this time than what was on the table with a few months ago? Actually, it will be regardless of what I did. That we have, as you know, a lot of money where we're building existing wall. What is existing funds? But I have a lot of options. Just like we do with Venezuela, we have on the border. We have a lot of options and a lot of things are happening, very positive things. The numbers are almost $183 billion, which report too often. It's about an 8% increase over last year. So if you look at the total funding, it's almost up to $23 billion. It's about 8% higher. Want to get into some of where that $23 billion came from in a little bit, but I do want to bring in our Capitol Hill reporter Catherine Fall there. She's been on the story all day long talking to lawmakers on both sides. Catherine, for Sporting, get your sense about the vote that has to happen before President Trump can even consider signing it or not. But Congress has to vote on it. Where do we stand on the House and the Senate actually voting on the deal is yet exactly, and they still have to vote on this. We haven't seen in that text yet. The president says he also hasn't seen the full text of that. We're expecting next night we also expect to vote on this in the House, we're told, sometime tomorrow evening, so that doesn't leave too much room for, of course, the Senate to bring this up for about and then for the president to sign it. Devin, but I would say that we were talking a little bit about this before him, that the two sticking points here with this deal are back pay up for federal workers in the Violence Against Women and Women's Act now would want. Told our interest Turner that he's been tallest. The president once signed that when asked why federal contractors' back pay is being held up, and the other aspect of this is the Violence Against Women Act, where Democrats don't necessarily want full-year extension of that as well, or just to underscore that we're Catherine to Queen Mary Alice the president. Democrats rather. Tina Smith, senator of Minnesota, take a look. She tweeted about editor earlier want to get some money for all those federal contractors, the people who are or who work at will when the 30-day shutdown hit a month ago. They were I don't lock on, they didn't get back pay approved ahead of time, so this is an effort at the 11th hour now to get simmer recompense for them. And I'm sort of surprised that Republicans are opposed to that, because there are so many of these people who are hurt. It might be because this would be expensive. Shutdowns tend to be pretty expensive for exactly this reason. The government has sitting or standing contracts that allowed Health Inc. should be honored. Even if that federal government isn't gonna pay its bills all of a sudden, and you're right there, real people's lives reflected in those numbers. Contractors like Janet Harris and security officers who are doing the worst. A lot of them working even during the shutdown, but without pay. Democrats not arguing that they should get some backpack. We're joined now on the phone by one of those contract workers, then Norka Talker. She's a contractor. with the food service company that supplies meals in the U.S. House of Representatives said the North Korea joining us now. Great to have you. You were out of work for 30 days without paid. Tell us the financial impact the shutdown had on you as a contract worker. And what you'd like to see Congress do now to make that right. That's been the purposeful and we've been worth it, and what we know is that with what they did, what they checked, that they a living, that we don't say this stuff earthquake but it. So many up there want shops that might you be here on Capitol Hill, and many of the work. And yes, pretty having chilies turned off. So it on the table, hey, you don't pay out of here at such an apoplectic out there that people here Monday to build it like they did, and but which it bear it up or west. Did you or I need your colleagues consider? Moving companies are changing jobs in the week they shut down as a party that wonder as if there's a question of job security in the event of sacks. A long shot too. Well, I don't think people thought that because it gives if there is what they got. Job market is addicted to that. It don't object more about wanting to get that on the outs. And do you think that the area that we are working in, the District of Columbia, about the area that many people were affected by the knock at the federal government, what does that? Many people where the federal government check them but don't go out and illegal weapons spend money. It will not yet this in particular federal agency, but it would sure they'll get it every. The darker Tucker contract worker and food service at the house on the job now making paycheck again, but very concerned about the prospect of another shutdown, also seeking some back pay. The North, I thank so much for calling and ensuring your perspective. Appreciate that. I'm so many people got injured, can't pay an Indian letter, working in cafeterias that are working as janitors. They're keeping these institutions afloat. In general, how low page were members, they're not getting the federal benefits for federal employees are getting. Republicans are certain types right here, right aiming Nate. As you're hearing today up on the Hill, they want this deal to go through. They don't want another shutdown, and yet they're sort of been hammered by conservative commentators both about the lack of funding in the wall and also the expense that this would occur. Rent provisions like that's. Republicans have said there's just not an appetite for another shutdown. And I think Democrats see that, and they see there's some political little room, and so they're trying to make sure that there are dotted our I's and presented T's right now on the 11th hour. And meanwhile, the president is trying to sell his base and this idea that he's actually constructing a border wall. Let's go back to Capture Fall. There's up on the Hill, Catherine, that we heard the president mention the top of the show that he is inclined to take the deal. Could seek and cobble together a $23 billion in border wall money from other places. Where's he getting that number from? Yet, but it's $43 million. Devin, in my mind, is limited and distraction here that's under. And the operating budget of the Department of Homeland Security Act as it has to do it. Border and that funding, it is not necessarily building this woman. Now what he is talking about doing, and where this gets a little bit complicated, is that there's talk of him taking that $1.4 billion deal, but at the same time pulling money from other agencies, from other pots. So for the Department of Defense, for example, there's a federal statute where he can pull at most $4 billion from their budget. Now I'm told from sources about is unlikely to happen. They are unlikely to get all of that $4 billion, but still, even with that would again that 5.7 that he wants, but that won't sell. In addition, teens need programming money there. In many on the Hill and our resources, and said that he will likely declare a national emergency, hands mouth, and to get into $5.7 billion mark, but it could also put him way over that mark. So there's talk that he could do the $1.4 million. Then we appropriated funds from other departments and declare a national emergency, is lot on his top advisors up here. Senator Lindsey Graham, Congressman Mark Meadows there, also saying that they think that he'll do both of these options. As usual, see Captain followers, thanks so much room for your reporting up on Capitol. Come their house, we should say yesterday in the briefing room, we've heard From top Democrats, they will not take that sitting down as the president tries to reprogram money. They are vowing to look at everything to challenge the president's authority and let's read anything in this in the executive overreach, and it is up to Congress to appropriate money. Congress has the power of the press. Meanwhile, shifting gears now to the vice president, he's quite active. He's undertaken a whirlwind tour of Europe at this hour, left early this morning to head to a couple countries to take on Middle East security countering Iran. Our Rachel Scott White House reporter is traveling with the vice president, has a chance to run doubles with him on Air Force as she joins coverage. Over to see you. So tell us what this trip was all about. What is it, what's in store? Well, the White House tells me Vice President Pence have expected to spend a very strong message to Iran, and the States is partnering with Poland to host that international conference here in Warsaw. That is aimed at maybe solving some of the security concerns and some of the problems out of the Middle East. Now the Vice President our ride today like he's that I was with him on Air Force to when he got welcome back to came into the airport. He was greeted by more than 600 military members from the armed forces from Poland and the United States. The United States has about 4,500 troops based here as of right now, but they could be expecting to get even more. There has been talk about even expanding that, needy even having a U.S. military base here to allow permanent residence for some of those 2 American troops here into the massive, with Willie focused on developing that relationship and that alliance between Poland and the United States. Vice President Pence called it more than just an alliance, he called it a friendship, and so today they were focused on that and expanding the NATO alliance and working together, and so they say that this is something that's going to stand firm, that the Vice President echoed that he's standing firm behind Poland and that they're looking for to continue working together. And yeah, actually standing next to Poland as their Poland stands up to Russia in day and in support of NATO. And before we let you go, Rachel, know you're traveling on that plane with Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law. Mark Greenblatt, he's the top in Middle East negotiator, which is very interesting. You had quite an encounter with that whole crew at a fuel stop overseas on the way there. Order her to rub elbows with some of them, ended in the duty-free. Yes, I have to admit this is my first time digging international trip, went the vice president, and it will be a rides on airports to be stopped in Ireland to refuel, and we got a stretcher and laid the little bear right over the long flight. I ran into the vice president in duty-free store. He was greeting and talking to some of the military armed force members that Red Mare. And a little carried away. It looks like the vice president left empty-handed. Me on the other hand, I got all the daddies, so I went back fade line and I looked up and everybody was on. Still I made a mad dash toward back gay and made it. I'm here, I'm fine, but you know, maybe just a first-timers in the state. I will definitely spend a lot less time in a duty-free store, and it's all right, a rookie traveling with the vice president, but that's smart one at that. Rachel Scott, thanks for that. Reporting from Warsaw, Poland at a very late hour. There are things ritual which are vacuum if you I missed a 12-month, yeah? The first time when traveling with his top officials. We're not out to ABC News exclusive. We sat down a little bit earlier today for the first network interview with the acting EPA administrator, soon to be likely confirmed by the United States Senate, Andrew Wheeler. He's a very interesting figure and we talked to him but today about a new plan he is rolling out, and bring in our environmental reporter now. Stephanie helped bring us the interview, also has been studying this new book planned. Stephanie. Andrew Wheeler talked to us about this proposal to tackle 2 of the most common toxic chemicals in the United States that Americans come in contact with but don't know about. What our next day, and these are chemicals that are used in non-stick pots and pans, and if you like here, waterproof jacket on makes it coats that it's used in firefighting foam. They're so common that every American has some amount of them in their blood, and the problem is sick people in some communities are being exposed to a lot more. An EPA is set to roll out tomorrow this big plan on how we'll deal with the chemicals We're seeing some pictures here. What it looks like, this chemical are called PFAS. You may have heard of it. Keep costs, the acronym embedded in the showed up in lakes. There's of these in Michigan. You're seeing it causes this foaming on the shorelines, but also to the drinking water. 16 million Americans. The EPA hasn't regulated a new chemical in drinking water since 1996. That they took a big step today. Here's a little bit by conversation with Andrew Wheeler earlier about the danger of this poses to American staple. How dangerous is the situation right now in your view with these chemicals? Where we do consider to be very important threat, and that's where we're moving quickly on this. So that the CDC report was just came out said that key facts is associated with pregnancy-induced hypertension, liver damage, thyroid disease, decreased fertility, increased risks of is not testicular kidney cancer. It's pretty serious. It is yours, and that's why we're moving forward with this action plan. And this isn't really groundbreaking action plan by the agency. We've done enforcement actions along under our existing authorities over moving forward today to create new authorities and our Safe Drinking Water Act. Removing forward said new regulations also caught an NCL accident containment level in a week. We know where the chemicals were manufactured or know a lot of the areas where they're actually used or were born into those communities to see whether or not the water in those communities are contaminated. But this is a guy again, this is we haven't slowed down, we've actually speeded up the process. And it's a very controversial position that he's taking. Mary Allison closely tracked the Democrats' opposition to the president's EPA nominees, including Andrew Wheeler was a former coal industry lobbyist, Chuck Schumer, and when Minority Leader has said that Andrew Wheeler is not doing enough to protect New Yorkers from those two chemicals, that he might block his confirmation. Can talk big though, but well, this is really interesting, and why this new RA from the EPA isn't big, with what has by and large been a rollback of regulations on energy production and on pesticides. And this is really a move in the other direction. Is Stephanie, I'm struck you talked to a lot of EPA officials, you know the administrators well, and he's a much less flashy figure than Scott Pruitt was, the first EPA administrator who resigned in that scandal. That ethics scandal was very convent. It does seem like Wheeler is trying to sort of calm the wallet water, so to speak, and instead conscious about his legacy. I did that impression. I mean, he'll tell you he was a coal industry lobbyist. He also started EPA. He's worked on environmental companies on the Hill. As it compared to the kind of flash and controversy of the Pruitt administration. He seems, very thoughtful. He tends in my impression is they keep for us to spend his time talking about policy. There's very interesting conversation. We'll have the full thing. We'll run the full thing for all 20 minutes tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern Time and 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC News Live. We talked some of the Green New Deal. We talked about climate change. We talked to him about President Trump in prison, Trump's view that climate change is a hoax, so there's a lot in there. Tune in a little bit later tonight. Fine night, it should be good stuff. Finally though, we've got to talk about something a little bit lighter. I'm not a golfer. Human capital is San. You aren't. I want you need over the White House. Check out clearly clear but yet determined that the president's new toy in the residence. The Washington Post broke the story. President Trump has installed a new simulated golf. A golf simulator in a room in the residence in the White House. Looks like something like this severely as well in the US. Yeah? I really doesn't wear giant climbs honestly. Resorts have been when you're getting ready and warming up on. I'm sure there's a new little criticize the president for this. Who knows how much it cost? Change the White House can be controversial. He's a golf enthusiast. He's owned golf courses around the world. Monies are pretty expletive. I imagine I need to try to mount. You sold me out. We should add that President Obama did have a golf simulator in the White House as well as a lower tech version of this, so we're told that this is simply an upgrade and for president company did pay for it apparently on his own money. Washington Post reports that it costs about $50,000 for one of those machines. This in prison term for probably have the cash to cover that happen. Iron and Limbaugh both spiritually and has been holed up in their probably shutdown days. We've got to go off tiny needing a lottery virtually golf. Partly to have you with us. Stephanie hands into your reporting on the environment, much more. abcnews.com. Always fun have grounds Park Shore this fresh off they held. Great to have you join us today here in a brief moment. Back tomorrow at 3:30 Eastern Time. Be sure to check out our Andrew Wheeler and PA exclusive 6 p.m. Eastern 10:30 p.m. Eastern ABC News 5. Well, see you next time. This transcript has been automatically generated and may not be 100% accurate.